Good evening, everyone. Bishana, welcome. I'm going to open up with the ancient prayer, short prayer, that was said before any classes or any writings were done. Some of the verbs will change depending on what they were doing, but the basic prayer is the same. And I'm going to do so now to open our session this evening. Al-Haile, the modern Ishwa Mishicha, Misharena Nilap, Milte, the Maria Lahahaya. Amen. All right. Now we're going to continue with the book of the Revelation. We are still in what we call the fourth vision. The fourth vision does not end until you finish up to 14. Chapter 14, when you finish all of chapter 14, then the fourth vision is finished. Chapter 15 and 16, no, 15 through 18, it has the next set in the visions. So this is vision 4, and when we get to chapter 15, we'll be in vision 5. There are 7 major visions. Right now, the 7 seals have been broken, and the 7 trumpets have sounded, and we're in an interlude. And the interlude is chapter 12, 13, and 14. And we're dealing with imagery, what we call them symbolism, but imagery. You see, the language of the soul is imagery. It's not words, it's imagery. And that's why when you dream in images, and you see all kinds of things. Sometimes you do hear words and something is spoken to you. It depends on what kind of a dream you're having. But most of the time, it is imagery. And the imagery has meaning. So in chapter 12, we were introduced to a woman in the sky who was clothed in the sun. In other words, her clothing was the sun itself. And then a red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. Now this dragon is going to change as we go on. From a dragon, it'll become a beast. But you're going to see it's almost the same description as we go on. And we left you with the dragon and going after the child that was to be born from the woman in the heavens or the sky. So, and chapter 13 deals with the beast. All of a sudden, that dragon now is going to become a beast out of the sea. These 2 visions of the vision of the dragon and of the beast coming out of the sea, they're going to have to meet something. And that is in chapter 14, another imagery. And this imagery is the Lamb. So we have 4 major images: the woman, the dragon, and then the beast, and then the Lamb. Those are the 4 in chapters 12, 13, and 14. Those are the main images that we are dealing with. And last week, we were in, just as a little bit of a reminder, we were talking about the woman. You must remember, the woman does not mean the Virgin Mary, although some people interpret it that way. It means the remnant of true followers of the Lord God and the Lamb. So it means ancient Israel, that is Israel, where a remnant of people in Israel before Jesus was born, there was a remnant of people that were crying out to God for the Messiah, for something to happen. And they kept all the ways of God, the true ways of God in that time. So that's why they're likened to a woman. Now the woman will then eventually become what we call it the church, but really it means the believers in God and in the believers in the words and the teachings of Jesus. So that is the major symbol of the woman. And when you say, well, didn't Mary give birth to Jesus? Of course she did. But what it's saying is the reason why we have a man by the name of Jesus coming from Mary is because the remnant, the consciousness of the remnant was ready to receive the new one that is coming. That's why it says, remember, the woman is clothed with deity, the Son. She was clothed with the Son, which means deity, which means they were followers of the Lord God. And that's why she's clothed in the Son. She's clothed and bathed in the very presence and essence of God, the remnant of people who kept the commandments of God and the teachings of Jesus. And later on became all the followers of Jesus, not just those from Israel, but from all over the world. And the church is called the bride of Christ, also the body of Christ. But where we got these terms, you will get the idea of the bride of Christ from the book of the Revelation. It was a church later on that introduced the church as the bride. And Paul talks about it as the body of the Christ, which is something else. I don't want to get into those teachings, but I just wanted to show you the connection to everything. Okay, so let's continue now with the 12th chapter of Revelation. And I left you with the 5th verse. That's where I concluded. Now remember, the red dragon, or as Dr. Lamsa translates it, the fiery dragon, which is the same thing. It was totally red, which means very destructive, misleading, misguiding. He's going to get other names in a minute, which I will explain. And he is a false religious and a false political ideas. It's ideology with power. It's an ideology that has taken on power. Religious ideology, especially in Rome. This is really talking about Rome here. The religious ideology in Rome and the political ideology in Rome. The emperor is the Son of God in Rome. He represents the God and religion. He does both. So this is what the dragon signifies, but it's going to tell us even more as we go on with it. So the woman then delivers this dragon, is ready to devour the child when it is born, meaning from these pious Jewish followers of God, they finally have in their midst the child. And she brought forth a male child. This is the 5th verse. Who was to shepherd all the nations. What it says, who was to shepherd all the nations with a rod of iron. And I left you with that, with the idea of the rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. In other words, he didn't stay here. He was here for a while. He was to become the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords physically here, but they killed him. They slew him. And therefore he was caught up to God and is in the throne of God, to God. But he was to rule with a rod of iron. And people often ask me, well, if this is Jesus, then why does he have a rod of iron? Because the rod of iron symbolizes the opposite to the way of the world. And any discipline that's opposite to the way of the world and how they work through the systems, that is an iron discipline. Because you have to change from greed, from competition, from all the ways of the world. Because the ways of the Lamb, remember, this is the Lamb we're dealing with. The ways of the Lamb are not the ways that people were expecting. They were expecting a warrior Messiah. They were expecting another King David, a son of David that would be able to fight It was David who brought peace, total peace to Israel, who stopped all those who were against Israel. King David was a fighter and a warrior. That's why the Messiah was supposed to be a son of David, because he'd be warrior-like, fire. But instead, he turns out to be a lamb, which I have the picture of the lamb behind me here, but I'm going to bring it up close when we get to the 14th chapter, where I will be dealing with the lamb. Okay, and I want to show you what you got to keep in your mind when you think of a lamb. This is a beautiful picture that an artist drew that was given to me. It's just beautiful. And when you think of it, but here we are now dealing with this dragon. And she put forth this child. He was to rule with a rod of iron. Now, I hope you understand the rod of iron means a strong discipline. Why is it strong? Because it's the opposite of the teachings of how the world works, how competitions work, how business works, and greed and all that. And it's the opposite. This is just the opposite of it. And that's why the shepherding was done with a rod of iron. You never want to shepherd sheep with a rod of iron. You always want to use a branch from a tree, and it's always the little lambs that haven't learned the discipline yet to stay with the flock and follow the shepherd. They have to learn it. And they use a little branch, and that's how they discipline the lamb. So that's what the shepherd uses. He never uses a rod of iron, but it uses that, meaning the strength and power behind this discipline, because it's opposite to the position and the teachings that the world does. That's why it's a rod of iron. Okay. And her child was caught up to God and his throne, which I already explained that. Now the woman fled into the desert, the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God. And when the persecutions really got heavy in Israel and also in Syria, and they fled, went into the desert. That even from political situations, people fled to the desert and into the caves. They all did that. Okay. So, but this is what many of the followers of Jesus had to do to escape persecution. So that's why I said the woman fled, which means the remnant fled. That's the woman fled into the wilderness. And God had prepared a place for her where people took them in. Desert people took them in, tent dwellers took them in, and they should feed there 1,203 years, which means 3.5 years. 3.5 years. That's how many days they were there, which again, you cannot calculate it literally as 3.5. That 3.5 means a short duration of time for protection. Okay, that's what it means there. Okay, so verse 7. All of a sudden, there was a war in the heavens. In other words, he's looking up in the sky and he sees a war starting to go on. Michael and his messengers, we say angels because that's from the Greek, but Aramaic is malache. Malache is messengers. Because the following Greek, we use angelos, which is the angels from the Greek, but it's really messengers, fought against the dragon. Now remember, the dragon represents false political and religious ideology, so-called teachings. Now it's Michael and his angels. Michael was a defender. Michael was a fighter, which means truth. Truth is going to battle the dragon. Let me tell you, people take this literally. They think that at one time, this dragon was in the heavens, Satan was in the heavens, and I'll tell you why, because of the verses that are coming up. And actually, Michael had a fight with this dragon and cast him to the earth. They use this for the power of Satan, but they don't understand Eastern terminology and they take it too literally. That's what I'm going to explain to you tonight. This is one of the verses that I do to explain people this is not about a literal being called Satan. This is about truth versus misguiding ideology. Ideology that gets you into trouble, false teachings. That's all this is here. And Michael represents the truth. So truth and error, or truth and evil, regardless of whether it's religious or political, they will fight, and which is true. All right. And his messengers. Notice why it says angels, which means his messengers, which means those who know the truth. They stand up against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels. Because of the word angels, they think, oh yeah, this has got to be Lucifer. This has got to, because they don't understand the book of Isaiah. There is no such thing as Lucifer. And that meant the bright and morning star, even in Hebrew. Even in Hebrew, it meant something else. So, in the Aramaic here, it's the dragon and his messengers fought, which is all the false teachers who carry the false ideologies, false notions, and they're fighting against those who are carrying the truth, which are the messengers of Michael, and the others are the messengers of the red dragon, the delusion and the falsity of this dragon. Okay. But did not prevail. Neither was their place found any longer in heaven. They couldn't stay there anymore. This false position, we have the power. This false position in the heavens means a false understanding here. You know, literally, you can understand this even within your own being. In the heavens, which means in your consciousness. And Michael is the truth, always battling the false notions and thoughts that we often harbor. Oh, there's several meanings of this, but I'm going to give you the overall meaning. But when they used to interpret it metaphysically, which they did in the early church too, I could also do some of that too, because that fight always goes on in us. Do I follow Michael or do I follow the dragon? Okay. So, but did not prevail, and there's no longer a place found in the heavens, in the higher sphere. Thus, the great dragon was cast out. Now, this is where they get the idea that it was Satan, because of this 9th verse. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent. I love that way to put it. That old serpent. In other words, it's harping back to the serpent that talked to Eve, that old serpent. And that's why it's talking that way. Called the devil. Now, the term devil here means something that's crazy, nutty, a false ideology that is absolutely crazy, if you believe it. In fact, they used to call idol worship devil worship. Why? Because it was stupid and ridiculous to pray to an idol that had no power, nothing, instead of in spirit to God, which has to do with power and energy of your being and your spirit and your soul. And here they are praying to an idol of the different gods that they had in those days. So that's why they say devil. Devil doesn't mean some little demon running around. That's Greek. Demon is a Greek word, and the original meaning of demon isn't always evil. Demon means your inner self. Your inner self. That's what it meant originally in Greek, but it always now has become. They didn't know how to explain the inner workings like we do today in psychology, so they used the term devil and demon. That's what it means. Okay, so demon had a different meaning in those days. In fact, some of them even wore amulets of the demon because the demon would protect them. That was your own demon, your own protection, your own spirit. I know people never heard this because people don't study things like this. They don't study language. They don't study all this. They just take what they hear from the preacher and that's it. That's it, period. That's it. But again, it's a false ideology because people don't understand it. In Aramaic, that's what it means. And it says there, we continue now, he was called the devil and Satan. Now that's English. The English word there is Satan, but it's an Aramaic word. How do I say Satan in Aramaic? How do I spell Satan in Aramaic? S-A-T-A-N, just one extra letter, A. Satana is how I say it in Aramaic. Satana, which means S-A-T-A-N. We took it right from Aramaic and we say Satan, and we drop the final A and we say Satan, which in Hebrew it's Satan. So this is the whole idea. I can't ask Hani tonight to do it in Arabic, but because it's his birthday today, and so he won't be on at all tonight with us because he's celebrating his birthday all day today. I already called him, wishing him happy birthday, and tomorrow's my birthday. He was 56, and I will be 86 tomorrow. Okay, so let's go on. Let's get off of Satan here. Satana. Satana means to slip, to slide. For instance, when you go skating, you become very satanic because it means you're slipping, you're sliding, you're deviating. That's what it means, to deviate, to slip, to slide. So Satana, I'm talking about the meaning of the word in Aramaic, to slip, to slide. So what it's saying here is that great dragon. See, it's telling you it really wasn't a dragon up in the sky somewhere. It's the notions and false ideologies that detour you, that put you in trouble, and you slip and you slide. And it's crazy. It's crazy notions, crazy ideologies that get you into trouble. That's why it uses the word devil and Satan. But I'm putting it in modern English so you can understand it. This is all Semitic, Near Eastern language, whether it's Hebrew or whether it's Aramaic, it's still the same, and in Arabic also. So let's continue here. Who deceives the whole world? Everyone comes under Satana and Dewana, the devil. Okay. He was cast out on the earth, always in the lower realms. This is always in the lower realms, always dealing with the physical, always dealing with the material, always dealing with. That's where he finds where he can progress on the earth, on the land, where all the material things are, where all people get deceived by it. That's how he works it. The thoughts, it's no person at all. Okay. He was cast out on the earth and his messengers cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice in the sky saying, or heaven, or the heavens, either way, now the deliverance and the energy or power here means energy, and the kingdom of our God and the power of his anointed one, Christ, have been accomplished. Remember, we read that in the 11th chapter and in the 15th verse, because when all this stuff is happening on the earth, and all this deception, because that the dragon now is that old serpent, that crazy ideology and that misleading Satana, where you slip and slide. And at the same time, people can find deliverance, through the energy or power and the kingdom of our God, which is present. It is present here on the earth now. And the power of his anointed, or the Christ, have been accomplished. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before God day and night, is cast down. In other words, there is another meaning to Satan, the accuser, akel karza, something that constantly gnaws at you, eats at you all the time. That's what it means, the accuser, always accused. And all the followers of Jesus were brought before principalities and powers. I'm talking about governmental powers, religious powers, and they were being accused of falseness, of illegitimacy, of misinformation that was dangerous, and all that. They were doing all that accusing. That is Satana. That is Satana. Okay. And that is the accuser. And they have conquered him. Oh, it's talking about those who follow the kingdom of God. It says they have conquered this dragon, this red dragon, this political and religious power. And they have conquered him by the sacrifice, by the blood of the Lamb, because he lost his life teaching this truth. That's why it says by the blood of the Lamb, because he lost his life to teach us this truth. And who killed him? Rome did. Romans crucified him. Okay, so it was the dragon. So he says, but they have overcome by their testimony, word of their testimony. They did not spare themselves even to the death. That was the followers of the Lamb. Therefore, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the land and of the sea. I explained to you that before. The sea means the islands. People who dwell on islands, live on the islands, because that's still land, but they're out on the sea. They're islands on the sea. And his wrath is great because he knows that his time is short. You know, when people get caught up with, they get desperate and they do desperate things. They know his time is short and they are enraged. They are enraged. And they always go after the people. They always go after them. And accuse them and lie and do all kinds of things. Wake up, people, to political powers. This is how it works. This is how it works. It's how they keep you under control. Okay. And when the dragon saw that he was cast out down on the earth, which means cast to the ground. The earth there just doesn't mean the globe here. When they mean the whole globe, they would say the world, but here it means the earth, meaning the ground. He liked it when he was up in high, where he had the power going in the higher realms. Now he's down where? On the ground, cast on the ground. Earth, that's what it means. The earth is the ground, the dirt. He pursued the woman. He says he's not going to let this church get away with it. It's really not the church. When you're thinking of church, you're going to think of our churches here in the Western world. You got to think of the remnant of people that fled from political powers, from other religious powers that were going after them. And he pursued the woman who had given birth to a son. That is the teacher. The remnant had given birth to the Christ. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, which means, remember, Jesus warned them. He told them, when he told them that the temple would be destroyed, that it would be not one stone would be left upon another for the temple. And he says, and when this time comes, he says, flee. There will be no time to go down in your house and get things. Or if you're out in the field, flee right then and there. That's why it says 2 wings like an eagle. 2 wings like an eagle means fast. Get out fast. You'll go fast. So the woman was given 2 wings like an eagle. And that's why it says like an eagle. To fly fast, to get out, flee, to get out really fast. That's why it says to fly, move fast. And that's why 2 wings were given to the woman. And the early followers fled. Okay. And it says of the woman, let me see, I lost my place. Okay. That she might fly from the presence of the serpent to the wilderness or the desert, into her place where she would be nourished for years and months and days. 3.5 years went in the symbol before, which means a short period of time. Then the serpent, notice it didn't say the dragon, because now the dragon has become the serpent, because it tells you what the dragon really was, the serpent, that old serpent, the liar. And now it opens its mouth, because let me tell you, no water comes out of a dragon's mouth. Fire comes out of a dragon's mouth. But here it says, then the serpent sent a flood of water out of his mouth, so that he might cause her, the woman, to be swept away by the flood. Okay, what is that? You know, when a flood comes, everything is swept away. And he went after the woman, and he opened his mouth. And now remember, it's the serpent that's opening his mouth, which means the liar, the falseness, the false ideology, the false notions, the false teachings, opened its mouth. And remember, it's the accuser. This is the accuser at work. So it's false accusations and accusing them. You did this, you did, and only showing the one way. This is, and it's their way, the way of the serpent's way. That's okay. And everyone else is wrong and needs to be punished. So the flood comes out, the accusation to drown the woman, to drown the remnant of people who believe. Interesting, isn't it? And what happens? And to swallow, but the earth helped the woman, and the ground opened its mouth. In other words, an earthquake, and swallowed up the water. In other words, a lot of the flood, a lot of the falsities were proven wrong, and they got protected. And if you know anything about the early, especially if you study the history of the Near East, more than you just study what we know here in the Western world, what happened in Rome and Greece and all those places. When you study what happened all through the Near East, you see how this worked out beautifully, because at first they were accused, and then they were welcomed, because they became a part of everything. They became a part of the politics. They became a part of the religions, all of that. They were even helping when Islam came along. The Islamic preachers and teachers hired a lot of Christian workers who worked together, because they didn't make it a barrier like we do today. They didn't do that. And even when they went into China and all that, when you study the history of it, they hired these Christian people. They weren't against them. And they could, and the Christians were brought out where there was common knowledge, common understanding. That's forgotten today. You're just no good if you don't follow what I follow. That's our belief today. So that's what it means when the ground opened up and swallowed the water, the accusations. It's not true, not true. So, which the dragon, see, now we got back to the dragon, which the dragon had spouted out of its mouth. But I told you, the dragon doesn't carry water in its mouth. It's got fire in its mouth. That's why this is imagery. It doesn't follow with straight imagery. No dragon would let water come out of his mouth, but accusations. See, this is symbolism. Okay, imagery. And the dragon was enraged. Oh. And that's why we're going to get the next thing that happens in this next chapter. The dragon was enraged. He could see that even though when he was powerful up there in the sky, he's got to do something different now. He's going to change. He's going to morph into something else. Morph into another being. In the imagery here. A powerful imagery. Since the accusations didn't work, he's got another plan, another kind of ideology that's going to work. And the dragon was enraged at the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her children. So she had more than just that one who was Jesus. She had many other children, and the dragon's going to make war with her children. Remember, the children is the woman is the remnant, and she keeps giving birth to many followers, to more, and they're called children, and many, many sons, many daughters, all of that who followed this way. And the dragon's going to go after them, and this is how now he's going to morph, and not be a dragon. He's going to become something else. And her children, what of her children? Who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus, and follow the teachings of Jesus. Now, the imagery is going to change again. And so the Revelator says, I'm in the 13th chapter now, and I stood on the sand of the shore, and I saw a wild beast. Now, Dr. Lamsa translates it as wild beast, but literally, if you're reading it in Aramaic, it says a vicious she-beast. A vicious she-beast. Why? Because they're more ferocious. And this is what he's morphing into. A she-beast, a vicious beast, a vicious beast. Not just wild, vicious. Vicious beasts rise up out of the sea. Now remember, he fell down to the earth. And that's why it says, watch out for the people who dwell in the sea and those on the land. So now this vicious beast is going to rise out of the sea. And you know, in the scriptures, you know, the sea always represents things that are hidden. So it represents the subconscious too. And that's where the beast gets collected and morphs. He always morphs in the hidden places. He always morphs in what is in darkness. And now he's going to come out of the sea. No longer is it going to be, it's going to be still a sea beast, a vicious sea beast, but it's going to come from the subconscious and now get into the material, into the land. Okay. This beast having 10 horns and 7 heads. Where did we read that before? Let's go back to the dragon in the 12th chapter. And there appeared another sign in heaven. Behold, there was a great fiery dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. Now here we go. We're reading about the beast. And this beast, vicious beast, not wild, it's vicious. Vicious beast out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. It just reversed it. Instead of saying 7 heads and 10 horns, this is 10 horns and 7 heads. Which means we are dealing now, before it was mixture of religion and politics. Now this is strictly politics. We're into governmental power here. This is what it's talking about. Having 10 horns and upon his horn 10 crowns, just like before, the dragon. And upon his heads, blasphemous words. See, he's still going after the children of the woman. But he's morphed into something else. This ideology has morphed into something even stronger. In other words, what might have just been a plain, simple ideology or religious ideology or some other form of ideology now took on the total form of politics, governmental power. This makes the people follow. It makes them, or it punishes them, or kills them, either one or the other. And the vicious beast, which I saw, was like a leopard. And his feet were like the feet of a bear. Oh my God. And his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. It could really roar and open his mouth big. So what do we have? We have a leopard, we have a bear, and we have the mouth of a lion. And notice what it says. And the dragon, which is the inner, is in the inner sense of the beast. The dragon is inside the governmental power. And The dragon gave his power. The religious notions, the other notions, gave its power to the political beast. And all the religions in Rome and all that, they always gave its power to the government because the government handled it. And its power and his throne and his great authority. And one of his heads was as though as though he was mortally wounded. We see, we're talking about Rome. This is talking about Rome. Who wounded Rome? I'll tell you who wounded Rome. One of its heads, because that was one of its central powers. The central powers was Rome. That's where all the emperors were. But when Constantine took over, there were three other emperors he had to subdue, which he did when he took on the church, when Constantine took on the church. And when he took on the church, he moved everything, the power of Rome, from Rome to Constantinople. Constantine and his sons who reigned after him, all Roman power. In other words, it was no longer in Rome, it was wounded. And now it's going to get healed because in Constantinople. And it says, and one of his heads was mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered about this vicious beast. And they worshiped the dragon because he had given power to the vicious beast, saying, who can prevail against him and fight him? And there was given to him a mouth that he might utter boastful things and blasphemies, and power was given him to make war for 42 months. Again, we're dealing half of 7. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling place and those who dwell in the heavens. And power was given to him over every tribe, kindred, and tongue, and nation. And it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. The word saints there means those who are dedicated to God. Saints means set apart. If you are a Kadisha means a holy one, a saint, and means you've been set apart because of the truth, you know. And all who dwell upon the land shall worship him, even those whose names are not written in the book of life, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man hears, let him hear. He who leads into captivity will go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So in other words, political powers always do this, but they eventually get taken. If they use the sword will be used against them. Everything gets taken. Now he's going to see another wonder. We have to drop this. We have to drop that about the beast coming up out of the sea. And I beheld another vicious beast coming up out of the earth. We're dealing with a land beast now. And he had 2 horns like a lamb. This beast is a false prophet because he had 2 horns like a lamb. 2 little horns. So sweet. This is how he deceives. So we've got a land beast now. And all power, the first wild beast before him was exercised by him, by this lamb one. Because look what it says, 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. Oh my God. How many political powers have we seen even in our day and age from different nations that speak like a dragon and promise you the world after they dominate it? Promise you the world. We've got it going on today too. Promise you the world. They're going to make everything easy for you. Wonderful. They're lambs. They're lambs, but they're liars. They're liars. And all the power of the first vicious beast before him was exercised through this lamb beast, lamb and land. And he caused the earth and those who dwell therein to worship the first beast, the political beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he performed great wonders to such an extent that he could even make fire come down from heaven, which means do wonders politically, and on earth in the sight of men. Beguiling those who dwell on the earth were easily beguiled, to make an image to the wild beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And he had power to give life to the image of the wild beast, and to cause all those who would not worship the image of the wild beast to be killed. And he compelled all, both small and great, rich and poor, freemen and slaves, to receive a mark on the right hand and on the brows. Because, in other words, they dominate your life. Your hand is all your actions that you do. You create with your hands. You write with your hands. You do everything with your hands. And on the brow means dominate the mind. Dominate the mind completely. Dominate all your thinking. Everything you should think this way and no other way. And you only act this way and no other way. If you do, we'll come after you. This is the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast. And what it's going to use now is something here. He says, and he compelled with this mark so that no one might buy or sell unless he had the mark of the beast. It was so mandated that they could not buy or sell. Gee, this sounds pretty familiar today even. Could not buy nor sell. Like lose your job and stuff like that. The beast, or the code number of his name. And I'll stop right there. Verse 17 and 18. The code number of the beast.